Good morning, class. I am Ashim Khan. As you all know, I'll be conducting BCL 211 basic calculation for quarter 2. I hope all of you are safe and sound. And every week I'll be posting lecture recordings and for your assistance. So let's not waste our time. We start off with the week 1 lecture. The overview for this course is it requires for students to perform calculation for the workplace using fractions, decimal, percentage, proportions, ratios and other metric measurement related problems. And let's look at your assessment. In order to achieve a pass in the unit, you are required to attend 75% of the lecture tutorials. Right, this was done previously, so your online participation is paramount. You are doing 2 assignments, 20% each, 2 short tests, 20% each, and final exam. We are yet to finalize about the short test and the final exam, but for the assignments we will be doing assignments, short test and final exams. I'll let you know in week 3 or 4 how we're going to conduct that. Looking at your assessment, your assignment 1 weighs 20%, and the topics for assignment 1 will be fractions and decimals, which will be due in week 3. Assignment 2 is on measurements, which is again 20%, and it's due in week 5 as short test 1 and final exam short test 2. We'll let you know afterwards. Okay, without wasting much of time, let's start today's lecture. It's on fractions and decimal. Okay, let's look at what a fraction is. The definition of fraction is simply say it's an expression that indicates the quotient of two quantities, such as the example given. There is a half written there, and the expressions, the upper part is called the numerator, the bottom part is called the denominator, and the line which separates the numerator and denominator is known as the fraction. Okay, let's look at some types of fractions. There are 3 types of fractions: proper fractions, improper fractions, and mixed numbers. A proper fraction has a numerator which is smaller than the denominator. Alright, take a close look at improper and proper fractions. Improper fractions, the numerator is bigger than the denominator. As you can see, the proper fraction example is half, the denominator is bigger and the numerator is smaller, whereas in improper fractions the numerator is bigger and the denominator is smaller. And the third type of fraction is mixed numbers. You can see there is a whole number and there is a proper fraction. Okay, let's look at some activities converting improper fractions to mixed numbers. Alright, we know that in improper fraction it has a numerator bigger than the denominator. And how are we going to do that? We just divide using a long division. Let's look at example there, 13 and 13 over 2. Alright, let's look at the solution. Alright, let's look at the solution. 13 over 2, we can see that the denominator is 2, so we can divide it by 2. 13 divided by 2, we can say that 2 can go into 13 6 times, so 6 times 2 is 12, so we minus a 12 from 13. 13 minus 12 is 1, so we are left with 1, and this 2 will come down and your answer becomes 6 over 2. Alright, let's look at it again. We have a 13 and a 2. What do? We divide this by 2, and 13 divided by 2, we can say 6 goes, 6 times 2 is 12, so we minus 13 from minus 12 from 13, we are left with 1, so 1, and this denominator, it just comes down here, so your answer becomes 6.5. Alright, let's look at converting mixed numbers into improper fractions. We have seen in the previous example, we have converted that number improper fractions to proper fractions, whole mixed numbers. Now we're going to go back. Alright, so let's look at it. It's 7/2. What do? We multiply here and we add here. So 7 2s is 14, plus 1 is 15, plus 1 is 15, so it's 15, and the denominator is 2, so we just write down the denominator as 2, so your answer becomes 15 over 2. Let's move on adding and subtracting fractions. To add or subtract fractions together, you must find a common denominator. Alright, there's an example there. Let's look at the example. The example is half plus 1/6. Alright, let's look at it. Can you see 2 and 6 is not common, so we have to get a common denominator. So the common denominator here is, we can say, is 6. Alright, we can multiply this by 3, multiply this by 3, so 1 3s is 3, 2 3s is 6. You can bring this plus down here, it becomes plus, and this 1 goes and 6 remains, so we have 1. 3 plus 1 is 4 over 6. Alright, so in fractions we don't leave answers like that, we have to simplify. So we can simplify this and we left with 2/3. How do we simplify? We divide this by 2, divide this by 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So we cannot do anything to this number, so this becomes your answer. Subtracting fractions, subtracting and adding fractions, they have similar things in common. You need to have the denominator same. Alright, you need to have the denominator same. If it's not same, you cannot add or subtract. So we need to make the denominator same. Let's look at it. 5/6 minus 2/15. Alright, let's look at it. So 6 and 15, the denominators are not same, so what do we have to do? We have to get a denominator which is similar. So what we can do, we can multiply this by 5 and this by 2 to make it 30. Alright, so this becomes 30. 6 times 5 is 30, and multiply this by 5. Whatever you do in the denominator, you also do it in the numerator. Alright, same thing here, same thing there. That's 2, sorry. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 5 is 30, so it's a minus. We put the minus there. 2 times 2 is 4, and 15 times 2 is 30, so we minus that. 25 minus 4 is 21/30. That is your answer. But you can see that it is we can simplify this fraction, so we can divide this by 7, divide this by 3. Divide this by 3, sorry, divide this by 3, becomes 7/10. Multiplying fractions is relatively easy. You know, to multiply fractions, you just multiply the numerator and you multiply with the denominator. Alright, let's look at an example. There is 1/5 multiplied by 2/3. So what do? We just multiply the numerator and you multiply the denominator. 1 2 is 2, 5 3 is 15. So that becomes your answer. To divide fractions, we need to change the numerator and denominator of the second term and multiply with the two fractions. Alright, you can see in your lecture notes it's written there, but when we look at the example, we should be able to simplify. The example given there is half divided by 3/4. What it simply means that we cannot just divide a fraction with another fraction. So what do we have to do? We have to change this division sign. So half remain as it is. We multiply, instead of having a division sign, we multiply the fraction, and as soon as you multiply the fraction, we flip the other fractions, or we call it a reciprocal, or reciprocate the other fraction. So it becomes 4/3, and multiplication is easy. You just multiply straight. So you multiply 1 4 is 4, 2 3 is 6. You can simplify, it becomes 2/3. Alright, let's look at it again. So half divided by 3/4. So we cannot just divide anyhow, we just have to change this. So as soon as I change this into multiplication, I will interchange the other fraction. The first one will remain as it is. The only thing we need to do is to change the other fraction. We call it reciprocate, and then we just simply multiply, and then we get the answer. This is not the answer here, 4/6. You need to simplify and get it in this form. This is your answer. Let's look at the second half of your lecture. It says it talks about decimal. A decimal definition is fraction with an unwritten denominator of 10 or some power of 10 indicated by a decimal point. Alright, let's look at how I'm going to add or subtract decimals. To add or subtract decimals, we just need to line up the decimal point. Please, you need to understand that we need to line up the decimal points, otherwise we will get the solution incorrect. Let's look at the example there. The example given there is 5.21 plus 32.1 plus 800. Okay, so when you look at it, 800 is just a number. So just after a number, there is always a decimal point. Alright, so that's I'm putting a decimal point there. It becomes 0 0 and 0 here. We just indicate it by 0. So we just add 1, 2 plus 1 is 3 decimal point in line. 5 plus 2 is a 7, and 3 plus 0 is 3 8. So your answer becomes 837.31. You need to line up the decimal place. Whole number, a decimal point is after the whole number. Thank you. Okay, multiplying decimals. In multiplying decimals, you don't need to worry about aligning the decimal point or what. You just multiply normal, and at the end you look at the decimal point. Let's look at an example, and then you'll understand more in the example. Alright, let's look at the example there. It's 3.77 multiplied by 2.8. Says 3.77 multiplied by 2.8. Alright, don't worry about the decimal point. We focus on multiplying the numbers first. So in multiplication of these numbers, we just multiply. So 7 8 is 56, 6 carry 5, 756 plus 5 is 61, 1 carry 6, 3 is 24, 24 plus 6 is 30, plus add a 0, 7 2 is 14, 4 carry 1, 7 2 is 14, 15, 5 carry 1, 3 2 is 6, 7. So 7 5 4 0, you just add 6, 4 plus 1 is 5, 5 and 10. Alright, this is your answer. So can you see, this is your answer, but we don't have a decimal point here. We need to put a decimal point somewhere. So how do we determine where to put the decimal point? It depends on this. Alright, so let's look at it. There is 2 decimal place here, 1 2 decimal place, and there's a 1 decimal place here. Total decimal place is 3, so we get 3 decimal place. So 1 2 and 3, so my answer becomes 10.556. Lastly, we look at converting fractions to decimals. How do you convert fractions to decimals? You can read the notes on the slide, but I'll explain using a example. Let's look at an example here. The numerator is 1 and the denominator is half, 2. So the fraction is half. We need to convert this fraction into decimals. So how do we do that? It's very simple. You get a long division. Do a long division. So 1 divided by 2. So 1 divided by 2. So can 2 go into 1? No, it can't. So we add a 0. As soon as we add a 0, we put a decimal point on top of that 0. So can 2 go into 10? Yes, it can. How many times? 5 times. 5 2s is 10. We minus, same thing, nothing there. So we can say that half and decimals is 0.5. So here we go. That was a lecture for this week. I hope you have understood the concept. It's on division, fractions and decimals. If you have any queries, you can ask me. Your assessments, I'll conduct your assessments as along we go through the week, and I'll let you know about your short test and final exam, whether we're going to have it or we're not going to have it. So stay tuned and tell your friends that your notes will be updated all the time. Tuesdays for auto electrical and Thursdays for agricultural students. So I hope you are fine, you're safe, and remember, keep washing your hands, social distance, and these are adverse conditions. We cannot do much, it's a pandemic. So thank you.